It is the Rotoballer PGA show, and we've got a good guest on the show tonight. We are drenched in blue, looking fancy across the board. I'm actually kind of really impressed with our color codes, and we've got Eric Polzin on the show with us from 925 Sports. So how are you doing tonight, my friend?
Pretty good. A little bit later than I typically do my content, and I don't want to get into too many details. I accidentally did like a 24-hour fast today, so if I'm a little bit less energized than I typically am on my videos, that's gonna be why. So quick apologies there if that occurs.
Don't you worry. I know all about the fasting. I got my Baby Ray's barbecue sweet sauce over here, so whatever that's got to do with anything. Spencer, how are you?
I'm doing well, Byron. We were talking a little bit off air before we came on. Last week felt like every single thing that could go wrong during the Travelers seemed to happen to you and I. I talked about fading Zalatoris in different iterations of the market, and we got this pre-tournament structure of it where every single matchup was juiced out to beyond what was bettable. And the one play that I could find on him was Adam Scott to beat him on day one. It's the one day of the three that he loses. Have a round four matchup with Eckroat over Hadwin, which Hadwin ends up making a 14-footer on the final hole. So that ends up becoming a push there. Ended up losing 2 units, not necessarily the best tournament, but I joked about it on Twitter yesterday. Even with that 2-unit loss, for whatever reason, that has just not been my event since I've gotten into the space in 2018. 2 units is actually the best week I've had there. So happy to be gone with this tournament. Excited to be in Detroit this go around. And I think it should be a good show.
Yes, dude. It's going to be a great show. I had Xander, cost me a top 10, shot a 70 in round 4 around TPC River Highlands. World number 2, US Open champion, Xander Schauffele. You loser on a Sunday. But it's okay. You got the US Open. Hopefully that can energize you a touch here, Eric, and kind of get you back in the saddle for us. How was your week last week?
Kind of the same, I think, as your guys's. I don't know. That event just seems to be a little bit more, I won't say hit or miss, just like with it being a no-cut event, it was just more random than I think most times, just in general. And just kind of a weird week in general. Nothing great, nothing terrible.
Yeah. I did one, I typically try and do like one. I'm starting to do like single entries a little bit more when Scotty's playing, and I had Benny on in my lineup. So that worked out wonderful for me, as well as he WD'd with a fever. But hey, you know what? Us in the Indiana Fever, we're going to rock and roll there and see how it goes. Where do you're in the Midwest, are you, Eric?
Yeah, I'm in Wisconsin. But shout out to Benny Ann for telling us Friday morning after he had withdrawn that he had a fever. That was, I mean, he's on Twitter a lot. I was like, come on, you couldn't have just tossed us a bone there and said it on Thursday. You weren't feeling, or Wednesday you weren't feeling that good.
And looks like Sunday the fever passed because he was roasting Scotty Scheffler about the security, the police officers being on the green. So tough scenes over there, but we'll just kind of get the Travelers behind us and time travel towards this week's Rocket Mortgage Classic, which is probably going to be even more random than last week, despite the quality of field we had and the golf course we were playing on. So Spence, hit us with what's actually, you know what? Let's go with Eric, and then you can touch up on the side of things. I totally kind of screwed that one up there. But Eric, what are you kind of looking for this week for the Rocket Mortgage?
Well, yeah, you kind of mentioned it. This one could be a little bit more, I guess, hit or miss than last week, but it's kind of a weird week from what I've noticed with the Rocket Mortgage. It's like the good plays that you're going to be on probably are going to really hit or be terrible. Like I think Hideki's a good example of that last year. He went from like, I think a 69 to a 74 or vice versa, just missed the cut. That's kind of the nature of this event where it can be a little bit more hit or miss. Chances are you're probably going to hit on some plays that maybe you wouldn't typically bet the top 10 that probably will hit. And maybe a couple of the favorites that you're going to be on. I don't know, maybe I'm not saying it's going to be Cameron Young, but a lot of people like him this week. Maybe he's someone that randomly misses the cut. Like that's kind of what I'm expecting this week and really kind of prepared for. So betting wise, going to know I'm going to miss some bets that typically probably shouldn't miss, and then vice versa, where it's just like I'm kind of fine chasing some more bets at the same time.
Yeah, I think kind of leaning into that variability this week is going to be a way to kind of get around that to a degree, is embracing it and knowing that that's going to come our way, Spence. So anything else that you can add to that might help the people kind of navigate their way through the Rocket Mortgage Chaos Classic?
No, I would just double down on that sentiment. I think anytime you get one of these birdie fest sort of a tournaments where you get that volatile nature of putting that's going to get amplified in the model building perspective there's just more chaos that comes into the mix with that. And I'd love to come on here and give a different answer than that. It's really difficult though. Like I think the one difference maybe is if you look at distance off the tee and short iron play, those are the two areas where we can try to create a model and build it in that fashion. But I kind of tend to think that the edge comes more from books making mistakes from individual players, because this is a very straightforward tournament. Any single podcast you listen to or anybody who releases content is going to talk about how putting is important here. You've had an average winning score of 23 under over the 5 years that it's been played. We know that there's some bomb and gouge mentality that comes into the course, and the proximity buckets from 0 to 150 that see that heightened nature there. When everybody's building in the same sense, a lot of models look the same. A lot of ownership concentrates in the same spots. And when we look from a betting standpoint here, numbers start getting skewed in different directions because books know where the action's going to come in one direction or another. And I agree with what Eric said. There's going to be players near the very top of this board that will miss the cut. Like, we can get into this when we get into our top 10. Just because somebody's inside of the top 10 of my model or any of our models doesn't mean that we necessarily think there's a value in it. Cameron Young would be one of the prime examples in my model where I have him inside the top 10. There's decent upside trajectory in my model, but there's also this volatile nature that comes into play with it where, look at what he had provided entering this tournament. And now all of a sudden, after all these results, we're going to just forgive everything. I understand that his distance and short iron play is really well tailored for this course, and there's a reason why he's produced the one time he's played it. But there's not necessarily this rollover course history nature if you look at the predictive sense of it. So I think you need to embrace the chaos. You're going to have to make builds that are a little bit unique and different. And that's no different than most weeks. But, if all the ownership's going to concentrate in the same areas, you're going to have to try to find ways to get unique and different. So hopefully we can talk about a little bit of that on the show.
Yes, I think that's it. This is the most it's always game theory from DFS perspective, but I feel like this week in particular provides you with the best opportunity to really embrace game theory and just how to construct your rosters and dodge the landmines that are likely going to blow up in our face, like Eric said in the beginning, right? So, Eric, let's start off with your number 10th guy and kind of go from there and see who we have the same. We have 3 different first-ranked golfers this week, which is going to be, it just goes to show, with no Scotty Scheffler, we've got problems. So you have Matt Wallace as your 10th ranked option.
Yeah, which I was actually pretty surprised by. It's so I'm really valuing par 5 scoring and birdie or better percentage, which he ranks out pretty well in the field. And he also has been playing pretty well as well recently, 5 straight made cuts. So I think that's part of the biggest reason. But looking at it, it's very kind of tight in general. He's tied, I think, with the next player that we'll mention as well for the 10th spot. Played pretty well in his last round. I think it was the DP World Tour as well. So he's just been playing pretty solid golf now for about 2 months or so. Earlier on the season, really wasn't playing well, but we've seen some more upside with him. But that kind of just goes to the nature of this event. It's just someone like Matt Wallace is popping up that much. Don't exactly love that, but at the same time, I wouldn't be shocked to see him, really outproduce his price tag on DraftKings or betting wise, really give a nice desirable result, like a top 10 bet or top 20, that wouldn't be shocking as well.
Yes, dude. I love that. I love also that, right off the bat, you've mentioned we've been, because me and Spence have spoken about this, and we don't want to rattle off explanations for guys that are inside our top 10 that we don't even really care about or but that's what the model's presenting to us. We're going to digest that information and act on it accordingly, right? So that's what we're trying to do here. This is the whole point of this segment, and I appreciate you leading us off with that. Spencer has Matt Wallace as number 6 for himself.
Right. Yeah, I guess my only concern with Matt Wallace, if I was going to throw out a negative, and we can get to the positives in the second, because if he's grading 6 for me, there's obviously a lot to talk about. I don't love the trip from the Netherlands getting straight to this event. I know that he's talked about that he loves this event. He loves this course. He is a little bit tired, and we've seen players in the past when they make that trip overseas and they end up back in an American tournament that there's been some jet lag that's come into play. But as everybody who listens to this show frequently or digests any of my content in any fashion knows, my model's pretty straight on for the most part with the top of the board. I run things from a really long-term duration compared to most. And when you get these aberrational results like a Matt Wallace who's 7,400 on DraftKings and open in the 66 to 1 range to win this tournament, there's a lot to like about him. So for him to land 6, it made him one of my favorite DFS plays. I ended up not punching an outright ticket on him, which maybe I'll come to regret. I did have some negative trajectory in my model for upside. Some of that travel is what concerned me at the end of the day, but the profile, as Eric talked about, like it's a very jarring result when you see Matt Wallace jump into a top 10 of your model when you build it, because that's not something that either one of us expected. And when I have these deviations from the norm, those are typically the plays where I'm going to try to attack them a little bit more aggressively for DFS. Although I will say to that, Byron, I think he's going to be very popular. I don't think Eric and I are the only two that have that sort of a thought process here with Wallace.
Hey, if he's popping up in 67% of the 3 best models around the country, I mean, obviously he's going to be popular, right? So obviously saying that with a little bit of tongue in cheek, Spence, you got your guy, number 10, knocking out Akshay Bhatia.
I'll let you talk a little bit more about Akshay than me. Like, this is one of those examples where I think he's going to be very popular. I know the current form looks great. If we're talking from an upside answer here, I don't love some of the Donald Ross results that I've gotten within my model. I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, Byron. I think you have an outright ticket on him.
I do, but I guess this is the fun part of it because he's not inside my top 10. It was I woke up this morning not knowing how to bet outrights and clicked his name. So because he's playing some really good golf right now. The drive is amazing. And I thought about what he did at the Valero. The guy was sizzling with the putter, right? So him and Denny just kind of broke away from the field. This is exactly what you kind of need here this week. This is a maniac play. You know, the model has him sitting somewhere just outside the top 10 or so. So it's not like crazy bad for him, but you know, he's really he's transitioning his game. He's 11th, you know, so he's just outside there. So I really fancy him this week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any takebacks there, Eric?
You know, I'm not that high on him, so I don't want to get everyone pause on him. But I get the play. I mean, he does pop up staff hit wise. Kind of what my data does is a little bit different. I have the specialist data rank, which is pulling in all the unique characteristics for that week's tournament, like Donald Ross courses, for example. Mm-hmm. That's where he's ranking out the poorest. He's like 32nd in the field if you combine all the unique things, you know, for the course. And so I think that's why the data on my end doesn't like him as much. But you mentioned the form, great form, really good stat fit as well. So that's a play I wouldn't talk anyone out of at all.
Yeah.
It's 8 tournaments in a row also. I mean, like him and Tom Kim both have that. And I mean, we'll see where Tom Kim is in my model as we get further in the show. So you can't say it affects one guy and doesn't the other. But when, like, I agree with Eric on that, when you have to make decisions and you can't play everybody, and your model, or I should say my model, is already a little bit lower on him compared to public consensus. If you start throwing some of those narratives into the mix, that pushes me in the other direction. That's just where I get a little bit lower. So like Eric said, it's tough to talk anybody out of him. He's inside the top 10 of my model. I just worry that between the ownership and the price tag that we're getting here and all the golf that he's put in with, I mean, he's outside of the top 140 for me in strokes gained total on Donald Ross courses. That's not where you want to be to win a golf event.
Yeah. I do want to just kick back that Donald Ross dust at your guy's face a little bit quickly and say that, you know, he changed the broomstick recently, and how much of the Donald Ross courses has he played since moving to that, right? So with Tony Finau last week, I think that was a perfect example of he went to the 5-finger death punch grip, and, you know, whatever you call that thing that he's doing on the handle of that putt at the moment, it really changed how his putt is going, right? And it's just been since that, we've seen a complete transformation in his putting stats. So this is the hard part about golf, is we've got these psychos that are changing grips, they're changing putts, like, it's just, what are we doing? We're trying to hit this thing. These guys just do the most random stuff all the time.
You know what's funny, Byron, is, I mean, I guess we can bring him up for DraftKings wherever he lands on that range of it too. Like, I'm the only one of the 3 of us that actually has him in my top 10, and the most glowing review, and it's not even close, has come from you. So it's just a funny nature of the industry here.
It is. He's our number 5 guy. So he's right up there over there. I'm going to just knock out Alex Noren. I'm going to just probably bet this guy at top 20. I've used him in a top 40 parlay. I think that's the way to go with him. If he goes low owned this week, I'll dive into him. You know, a lot of these top 4 guys, and we can chat about the 10K range once we get out of here, but I think it's going to be ownership dependent. I'm willing to interchange those 4 guys as much as I want. I really like that 9K range. So we can chat about that when we get there. Ricky Fowler, the guy whose soul got sucked out of his body when he made that winning putt and has just never been the same. I think it's been like 1 or 2 top 20s since. It's been disgusting after he was rattling them off like 75% of the time. So that was a bit sad from his side there. But we got Keith Mitchell there, ranked number 9 for you, leading in the field in strokes gained total for 2024. Eric?
Yeah, so I mean that's a big factor. Is a lot of my data is looking at the results from this season pretty much only, and then a little bit of last 5 and whatnot. But yeah, he's really popping stat fit wise. I actually have him as the best stat fit for this week, so that's going to tell you mostly the biggest story that you need to know with him. But he's been someone that has been popping a lot for me thus far this season, and one of my biggest worries is that he really hasn't had that many elite finishes. Like he's had a top 10 finish recently. And then like a top 15, he's been top 20 or so are his good starts really this season, a couple of top 10. So he hasn't really been in like contention to win it all. DFS wise, that doesn't matter. He's at a great price tag. I feel comfortable playing him. Batting wise, that's my concern. But DFS wise, 8.5 on DraftKings, I'm happy to just like kind of load up on him. This is one of those plays where if it burns me, I'm kind of okay with it burning me because to me, this is kind of the correct play on paper. The one concern is that no course history, I believe, and that's my biggest concern. Like maybe chasing those golfers that are around him that have that course experience, but that's about it.
I do think it's such a straightforward course. You can potentially, if there is, a golf course to get away without course history, it's this. And yeah, it's not often that the number 1 strokes gain total guy in the field hasn't had a top 5 this year. And his last top 5 was the 3M, which is approaching soon. Like we're in the Midwest swing. That was his last top 5 last year. So
the best swing
for him. Yes, our swing, the people's majors rolling through there. So, Spence, hit us with your guy at 8 for Keith.
Number 2 in my model and expected weighted scoring for this course. So that doubles down on a lot of what Eric's talked about. It's really going to be the putter for him. The ball striking always looks magnificent. And I feel like I have fallen victim to Keith Mitchell. I mean, I don't want to start comparing on the negative end of it, but I feel like I've fallen victim probably more than most people in the space where there have been a ton of events where he has finished Friday inside of the top 5 for ball striking, and he ends up missing the cut because his short game has lost 10 plus strokes. I think the positive that I would point towards is one of the things that I always look for in my model are players that get an increase in expected putting for the course that they're playing. So Keith Mitchell is 85th in my model in strokes gained putting over a 2-year duration when I run my model. He's 53rd specifically for this course. So if he does have that positive trajectory upwards in my sheet, and you see it in a lot of the iterations of how it's built, the price tag is too cheap for DFS. And it feels like it's the same answer that all of us are going to give on this show. I worry on the flip side of that, though, that the outright number probably has no value in the price that we're paying. So like him at 8,500, have more trepidation on the outright ticket.
Yeah, it seems like the best value for Keith Mitchell is in DFS, and we're going to have a cleanup on aisle 9, cleanup on aisle 8, and cleanup on aisle freaking 5 over here with the ownership that's going to be rolling through from Keith. So, it's going to be nasty. We had to throw up in the chat last week, Eric. It was the chat's going to have to take their meds and make sure that they can keep it clean in here. But let's roll on and see who Spencer's number 9th ranked golfer is. It's a guy that I'm not even clicking on because I don't know where it's going, and it's Camaro N. Young, according to the sheet here. And Spence, who's this dude and what's he doing?
I mean, that's already the problem. We can't get his name correct. I think that kind of signifies everything that I think about him this week. Like, the upside numbers look great. The price tag is too expensive. I keep finding myself in this spot where we can have an ownership discussion, and let's see where this is on Wednesday before completely discrediting him, because I talked about the distance and the short iron proximity, but it's really difficult for me to want to get to Cameron Young over a Tom Kim. It's really difficult even for me to want to get to a Cameron Young over a Minwoo Lee. There are a lot of other players that are beneath him in price tag that I would rather get to. And then Tom Kim is just a very easy pencil in that for $300 more, I'm going to probably move up there every single time. So it kind of goes to your point, Byron, of, we have a lot of discussions on this show about our top 10 players, and not every single name that's going to land is going to necessarily be a value for us. I would say the Batia Cameron Young route would probably be the two for me that I am most likely going to be lower on than consensus. And we can check back again on Wednesday. If there's no ownership, we can have a different discussion when trying to talk about leverage. But one finish has completely changed the name of the game to give this price tag back.
Yep. And a 59 last week is not going to help that because everyone's like, oh, he'll do it again, and the moment Cameron Young gets anywhere near contention, it is a disaster. And I hate that he's my number one golfer this week, but he's good. He's a good, great course fit. The form is awesome, but whenever he gets in the mix, oh boy, he is the guy that will throw up all over you, Jens. I think that's Spieth from last week. This is Cameron Young. Like a chalk Cameron Young is a guy that's been drinking heavily, and the throw up it's curdling, boys. It is curdling. So I'll dive into my number 9 guy and rattle him off real quick. Steven Jaeger, amazing course history at this venue. It's one of his favorite courses when it comes to strokes gained. I'm a big fan of him. I don't know if I could bet him outright. I don't know if he can get to the 25 under par kind of situation, but he's obviously played well here in the past. So we'll see how it goes. I want to monitor the ownership, but he fits right in that 9-4 range, which I think is going to be really, really appealing, to kind of go to. So I like him a lot. Will Zalatoris is our $9,200 golfer. It's the 8th most expensive option on the slate. And then we've got Eric with Davis Thompson sitting number 8.
Kind of going back to a little bit of a shock to me. I was a little bit surprised, but I kind of had to look at it a little bit more. I'm like, okay, coming in off of a top 10 finish, that's good. Has played this course twice, played it well twice, relatively strong stat fit across the board. Like for the most part, it's kind of the form of him missing a cut recently. That's the biggest concern for me. But the fact that he is coming in with recent starts that were top 10 finishes, one was at the Myrtle Beach Classic. I know a lot of people aren't probably loving that too much, but played well at the US Open, like that there. You look at his miscut, the Canadian Open, it was still just like one bad round that caused that miscut, 69, 74. So I'm kind of okay with like looking at something like that when prior to that, he was playing strong golf, kind of writing off one bad round in there. And so I am shocked that he is coming in that high for mine this week. At the same time, looking at it a little bit more, it does make sense. I really do like the price tag on DraftKings, and batting wise, I kind of wish the number was a little bit better. Like to me, Keith Mitchell compared to like Davis Thompson, I'd much rather go with Keith Mitchell. Just like in my head, that's probably a bias, but definitely sticker shock here. Looking at it more though, it does make sense. Would you guys see him as a cash play? Because I kind of view him as a GPP only play this week. I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are on him.
I don't see outside of the US Open, unless that is the moment in his career where he's found a bit of upside. I just don't see him ever finding himself inside. That was his first top 10 in like the last 12 months. So I would play him in cash because his top 40 rate is nuts, right? So I would completely flip it around if I was playing that, and I'd bet him top 40 as well because I think that's the market for him, in my opinion. But you never know. Par fives at this golf course, he loves them. Spencer, what's your take on Davis?
I'd like to see where his ownership lands, but when I look at my model, he's 14th overall. When I took a GPP approach to it, he was 25th. He jumped to 11th for safety, which is where the cash is. It'll come down to ownership for me because he has a lot of playability if he ends up being the overlooked commodity in this range for GPP contests. But I kind of agree with you, Byron. I think he's a good cash game play that's inside of the top 10 of my model for weighted scoring. That weighted par 5 outlook is really what propelled him in my sheet. And anytime we look at ball striking courses with him, my model always really likes him in these spots. So I would make an argument that just in general, whether this is a cash or a GPP discussion, the market is generally too low on him in a lot of these spots. Maybe because of what you've said, Byron, that you don't have a lot of those high-end finishes, but the skill set, like this is the prototypical sort of a course that I would expect him to find more high-end success. So I guess I would give an answer that I think he's playable for both, but if you made me pick one, I guess I lean towards cash with it.
So my model is basically set up to it. What I always say, it's like both measuring safety and upside. So it makes sense why he's popping up, and it makes sense why you guys are saying he's a cash play. But like to me, I was just like, there's no way that he's popping up that much, but it makes sense. That's my way of saying thanks for talking me out of the bias that I had.
No, dude, but that's the thing is like Keith, Davis Thompson, these are the kind of guys that they seem like they perfect course fits all the time, and they the stats speak to us and tell us, look, this guy's ready to pop. Just like you just see them top 10 over like Friday night, and you're like, oh baby, I got this guy right. And then we all know the story, right? It's just like T17 after Saturday, T23, T30 by Sunday afternoon. It's just unfortunately the way it goes. So,
I hate using this argument. I just want to bring it up very quickly on the show. If you look at some of the head-to-head matchups with Davis Thompson out there, he has already boosted out into like the -130 range against Chris Kirk. He is a favorite at some of the shops I've looked at against Taylor Pendrith, and that's kind of the intriguing one because I think all of us like Taylor Pendrith this week. So that really starts hammering in what the sharper early money is thinking of Thompson. I don't think that that's square action coming in because I cannot imagine that he's one of those names that the average Joe is looking to punch a ticket on in any capacity here. So I think he's a sharp mover right now. And, my model's not necessarily as high as Eric's is, but he's also a top 15 play that shows as a value inside of the DFS range.
Yes. And to get to that Taylor Penrith situation, Spence, he's 22% more made cuts than Davis. I mean, sorry, Penrith is a high boom or bust kind of guy, whereas Davis is just this ho-hum, I'm going to make cuts like crazy. Eric Van Rooyen, I think, is the only guy that we have on my guy, and he's the 8th ranked golf for me. I love what EVR's been up to, man. Like, I think using his upside rankings, this is where my rankings are coming from for the DFS side of things. I tend to lean a bit more safety for betting, and EVR is just, man, he's fun to see off the tee, and we know what he can do on these like soft, gettable golf courses like we saw at the Cognizant, where had that rain delay not shown up, I mean, we could have seen a really impressive round from him. So big fan of EVR this week. I haven't bet him yet. I may still. I have a bit of space left on my card, and I think in that 50, 60 to 1 range, we're looking rather tidy. So that's my guy. We've got some Maverick McNeelys. I don't have him. You two do. Let's see where that's going, Eric.
Yeah, so Maverick McNeely, again, kind of like the fact that he does have the course history here. 2 out of 3 made cuts, one of them being a top 10 finish. His better results were 3 and 4 years ago. Don't exactly love that aspect of it, but really good in par 5 scoring this year, 14th in the field, good in birdie or better percentage, which you do need to score on this track, top 10 there. So like that. What I really like about him, though, is if you kind of look at his form, it went from like descending, so it was getting worse leading up to that miscut. And then you look at his past 4 starts now, it went from 41st, 23rd, 17th, and 7th. So he's been getting better each start. So that's all encouraging to me. And just kind of across the board, looks like a solid play across the board. This is the beauty of this week, though. I've listed off McNeely, Davis Thompson, Keith Mitchell, and Matt Wallace. Typically players that wouldn't be popping too much. And we're getting them at cheap price tags for the most part. Kind of a DFS-wise, kind of a fair and balanced week. It could potentially be. We'll talk about some of the other studs. But I don't know. McNeely's the play that I'm kind of comfortable playing as well. So I'm kind of happy to click him as, I guess, Davis Thompson. I wasn't that excited to play similar plays, though.
Yeah, he can make tons of birdies. If he makes the cut, he can outscore his finishing position because I think the way he can putt. But he also is one of these guys that the closer he gets to the top of the leaderboard, he tends to like hit the brakes. But the majority of the field is that this week. Yeah. So it's like whose brakes hits the least, Spence?
I like Maverick McNeely. He was 5th in my model. I did include, so I always take the dispersion of scoring just from what we've seen over the last 5 years, and I will build a weighted strokes gain total in my model. So he ended up being 17th in that area, which is a little bit below his price tag, but where he really starts climbing is in a lot of the weighted scoring categories. He got inside of the top 5 of my model there. A lot of that reason is going to come down to the putter and his ability to score on some of these par 5 courses. I think he's a safe play at 8,900. Eric talked about what we've seen from him recently, where you've gotten this really built-in floor from him in a lot of these events. And I would say that there's a lot of golfers in this, if we want to call it I guess him and Aaron Rye would probably be the 2 that are like the most suited in my model for this answer, where just really safe options in the way that I built my sheet. I didn't end up betting them because of some of the long-term upside concerns that I had with them at the price, but it doesn't mean that they're not a good value on DFS. I do think they're both going to be popular, though. So just something to keep in mind as you're making builds this week.
Yeah, and just touch on Nikolai Højgaard as you're doing scooting on by there.
I mean, that's going to probably be the one that I am the most against consensus on of probably any player in the tournament, and that's going to be my spot where I'm going to be the most aggressive. Like, I envision a completely different year for him when this Open. I always run my model before we start the season and just put them on a standard expectation track, try to figure out who are the players in my model that I'm higher or lower on than where the market is going to be early on in the year. And then a lot of those things will deviate based off of the courses that we're playing. And Højgaard and Minwoo Lee were the two options for me that I was very aggressive on, wanting to try to figure out a way to get exposure to. And had Højgaard early in the year when he came in second at the Farmers, couldn't get across the finish line when he lost to Pavon there. But if you take that out of the mix, and then the Desert Classic in Dubai, he has yet to post a top 15 on his resume in 12 starts since that. You've had 4 missed cuts, an additional 4 finishes landing outside of 50th place or worse there. That's going to obviously discourage some people, but the way that he built and tracked in my model specifically for this course, I'm always trying to find course-specific fits and players that I'm higher on than the market on the venue that we're going to be played. And Højgaard just continued to pop in that capacity. First in my model when I took distance, proximity, and putting and put it into 1 grade. And then if you look at the one downside that we want to talk about, which has surprisingly been the driver, I talked about this being a bomb and gouge facility. So I love his ability to hit the ball far here. If the one problem has been his inaccuracy off the tee, I think he's able to miss, and his distance is going to be able to take him away from, there's thick rough here. There's a pretty easy driving nature to begin with, but there are going to be players that miss. So I think his distance is going to put him further along, and then he's going to out hit a lot of the bunkers. That sort of a blueprint for this venue is the exact reason why I liked Wyndham Clark last week, where a lot of people early on in the week were off him, and then it seemed like late people got onto him. I'm curious to see if the same situation occurs here with Højgaard, but this was the first outright ticket that I punched at 66-1. This was my favorite outright number that I had on the board. I usually bet to win 7 units. I bet this one to win 10. I'm going to take the advantage I have here, and we'll see if we can figure out different iterations of the market to also get more exposure down on this, because when I do have an edge in these spots, this is typically where I like to attack.
Let's go, dude. I love it. And the thing is, he hasn't shown up what he can, and we all expected some really good stuff. Some of the majors have been like his best few strings of events, and then he kind of fumbled the bag. But I bet a guy at 110-1 is basically the same thing as you, Spencer. Finished third at the Farmers, bomb and gouge. Played nicely at Mexico, nice long course. I think Jake Knapp at this price, I couldn't leave my hands off this dude. He's the only outright I've hit all year. I'm going back to the well. So if you guys go watch the Mexico Open show, and I'll tell you exactly why I like him. So
I'm laughing right now because while he was talking about Højgaard, I was like, man, that's my thoughts on Jake Knapp.
Yes, dude.
That's funny.
It's exactly the same thing. So we don't even have to chat too much. Spencer pretty much mentioned Jake Knapp in a nutshell. So I'm off Knapp already. We can move on to Taylor Pendrith being the 6th ranked DFS golfer, and Eric has Taylor Pendrith as the 6th ranked golfer for himself.
Yep, chalky right there. Yeah, I mean, pretty much just Taylor Pendrith. He's been playing well. He's a little bit longer off the tee. Probably, maybe has a little bit more winning upside if that's coming into play a little bit more this week. 4 straight make cuts, been playing well. Played this track really well. 14th second place finish here. He is also someone that scores really well. Top 20 in both par 5 scoring and also birdie or better percentage. So like that there from him. Form wise, everyone kind of grades it differently. I have him top 5 this week. So looking, just pretty solid in the field as well. It's just across the board. It makes sense why he's priced this way. It's kind of just, if you end up on him there at 9.6, like DFS wise, I'm happy. I call these shoulder short plays. I'm happy to go out of my way to click him to close out my build. I don't know if he's someone I'm trying to go out of my way to play, because I'm probably trying to do more fair and balanced, but he is someone that I'm definitely happy to click on.
Yeah. I love his ups. I love him as a DFS option. You don't want a guy. I mean, he's going to make the cut. He's going to play well for you. If he's not, he's just going to miss the cut. Like we spoke, he's making half his cut. So I also bet him outright. So Spencer, you've got him 3rd.
I also bet him outright. He was number 1 in my model at easy scoring courses. Also number 1 in my model in recent strokes gained total. You can look at any of the recent finishes that he's put together. 7 top 33 finishes over his past 8. He's posted a victory, 4 additional top 25s. Think he probably becomes pretty popular, but I'm fine eating the chalk in this position with it. there were not necessarily a ton of $9,000 golfers that I overly loved. Like, it's probably for me, Pendrith, Jaeger, Batia is how I would rank the three, but like there was a bit of a difference in where I think ownership is going to land on those names, which I do think Pendrith will be popular. But like, I would rather play Jaeger than Batia just because I think that the ownership is going to be, I don't want to say substantially less, but I would be surprised if Jaeger came in higher than Batia is all I'm going to say there. So there's not a whole bunch of $9,000 golfers beneath that I overly love. Like Zalatoris, he beats me every single week in matchups, and he finishes in 65th place in every event. So go figure on that. And then I think Ricky Fowler, it's just an ownership discussion. If everybody, like, if he's going to be 3% owned, he's 21st in my model. Those are some of those spots where I'm fine trying to create leverage against the field there. But if we're not getting a leverage discount, I don't necessarily have any interest on Fowler.
Amen. What's your take on Fowler, Eric? I think he's just lost it.
Well, with Fowler, it's in a weird way, it's kind of the same. And it's not data wise, but it'd be kind of the same logic as to why you would want to play Cameron Young, where, all right, it seemed like Ricky might have found something last week. I know he kind of tailed off in the weekend stretch, but obviously he's played well. Well, he won here last year. There's going to be good vibes here. Ricky's not someone I'm getting to, but you kind of mentioned, Spencer mentioned a few times, like ownership this week. And I think this week compared to like the last few, like it's kind of been boring ownership wise the last like month or so. It's been correct. It's the best way to put it for the most part. Maybe some small things here or there. This week, there could actually be some very big leverage spots here where you can make some strong game theory plays. I don't know if I would say Ricky's going to be one of them, but I just kind of want to echo that. I think this could be a huge ownership leverage week because what was it Akshay that you just used as an example in Jaeger? Like that could be something that probably very similar plays, like stuff like that is what I'm looking for. But to answer your question with Ricky, I think I would talk someone out of it. That's kind of how I always like to do my takes. Is like, would I talk someone out of it? Probably with him this week.
I agree. I hope he gets popular because I don't think he's got it anymore.
I hope he gets popular too, so I'm not tempted to go down that route.
For the sake of our self-sanity.
Yeah, that's kind of the best way that Eric answered it, though. Like, there's going to be players that are 5 to 7% or less that are inside of the top 25 of your model that may be incorrect when you're comparing their price tag to where your model has them. But when you look at the leverage number that's created in ownership, you may have a substantial edge that can occur in those spots. So I don't know if that answer is going to be Ricky here, and I don't want this to become Spencer likes Ricky Fowler and that's what everybody takes away. But I do want people to take it away from there's going to be players, and just always keep that in mind that if it's a player that's grading inside of the top 25 for you, give or take, there's a way to create leverage if the whole field doesn't want to get to them.
Right. If that area presents itself, you need to pounce. But Minwoo Lee grades out 6th for me. He's a guy that I bet, like I've used the Jordan Spieth roller coaster situation. You want to be on that roller coaster on your own. So you just throw up on yourself. I think that roller coaster is going to be packed with chefs, and if they're going to be cooking the wrong food, I mean, the food he's been cooking lately has been White Castle burgers and freaking Uncrustables, man. Like it hasn't really been anything since the Cognizant. I think he shows up at these majors. Maybe he shows up here. If he's going to be popular, I'm easy to leave him alone. So, yeah, cool. No one else in the mood to speak about Minwoo because I think it's obvious, right? It's like, it's rinse and repeat. Yeah, it's obvious guys that are going to be very popular. We're trying to dodge them. He's in the tops there. We got to go. So let's chat about Alex Noren for you there, Eric. He's your fifth guy.
Yeah, so I don't like the fact that Alex Noren is popping up maybe as much as he is originally. And I don't know if you guys factor this in, but I recently started to put a little bit more emphasis into Vegas data, a little bit more so. He was the second best at one point, and then the Vegas odds came in to make the cut, and outright wise knocked him down to 5, which I was happy to have happen because I don't like targeting someone that's missed 2 out of his last 3 cuts. Yes, one was at the U.S. Open. Kind of didn't expect him to play well at the U.S. Open. Missed a cut at the RBC Canadian Open. Don't like that. But prior to that, he had been playing some great golf, multiple top 10 finishes. So it's not shocking that he's popping up as much as he is. And he has played well at this course, 2 top 10 finishes. Going to be a good stat fit as well. I mentioned that specialist data that I do. I have him number 1 in that as well. So really strong course fit, if you want to call it that as well. So it's not shocking that he's popping up that much, but this is one where I've mentioned I'm probably doing more fair and balanced. I just maybe outright wise, I don't mind him 25 to 1 ish, but DFS wise, it's a tough click for me, even though he's popping up top 5. Like, I think I'd rather get to just the guys that are cheaper than him, honestly. We'll talk about a couple of the other plays that are popping up a little bit more for me, but are you guys like, what are you guys at with Norn? I know he was 10th for you, Byron, but it's, I don't know. It's a tough click.
Yeah. I mentioned if he gets popular, I'll just be betting him top 20 or top 40, whatever makes sense. And he just doesn't have the upside. He's one of the 2 people though that has the top 5 at the CJ Cup, which I guess is a kind of a comp course here, but I think he's going to be popular. He's always popular, right? So ever since Spencer mentioned him on the Action Network like 2 years ago, Alex Noren's just been in everyone's mind.
Well, that wasn't good publicity. I think he missed every single cut on all the Action Networks. I went on that Best Bet show with Chad Millman and Simon, and the big takeaway that everybody got from that was Rory was going to win Augusta, which if I ever do that on a golf show again, just pull me off the air, Byron. Like, just have me muted with that. And then Alex Noren was one of my favorite value plays. And I mentioned on the show, he was an extremely volatile play. I feel like I was 2 years too early on what we've gotten from him at this point right now. I like him better inside of the safety markets that you're talking about, Byron. Like, he's 13th in my model. I don't have a massive take on him in the outright market. I think he's a fine play. I think he's a little bit overpriced, but I don't have a reason to tell people that they should or shouldn't play him. He's a negative value in my model, but there's a lot in my model that also likes him.
Yeah. And I think maybe because of his price tag, we might see him a little less owned than what we expect, right? Which might make him a neutral value for you. Tom Kim, Eric, number 3 for you.
Yeah, I mean, so we mentioned it's where are we at with playing 8 events in a row, him and Akshay. Do you guys care about that? Because like with these young guys, I really don't. Like, good for them. Keep playing like they can. I don't know. Do you guys have a stance on that? I'm curious.
I have a stance on Akshay because he's missed more cuts than Tom Kim, so he's played a lot less golf, I would say.
Yeah.
You can take those weekends off. That's a lot of rest time that Tom really hasn't had, and he played quite nicely at the US Open. But Spence, what's your take on the rest?
No, I think if somebody's playing well and my model likes them, there's no reason why I'm going to take them out of my player pool for that reason. Yeah. And he's number 1 in my model this week.
Sorry,
so
clicking the wrong buttons.
There's a lot that my math liked about him for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it kind of reminds me of Sun Jam when he was playing a lot in his rookie year. Like, what was it, like 12 straight starts or something like that, where we just didn't really care. We were just firing him off. So I'll let you touch on him since he's number 1. I mean, obviously great form, going to be a good stat fit. But yeah, number 1.
Yeah, inside of the top 10 for me. So one of the things I like to, and I included in my article that I do over at Rotoballer always, is I have 7 main categories that I ran this week. And it encompasses a lot more than just what shows on the surface. There's a lot that's built into it. There's course specific fits. There's a whole nature that goes behind it with just like not the rudimentary outlook of, your expected strokes gain total. Like it takes a bunch of different facets to it. But if you look at those 7 categories, Tom Kim graded inside of the top 10 of 6 of those categories. And where I talked about Højgaard being the one name for me where I was going to be higher than consensus, he was also 6 out of the 7. Those were the 2 names that had the most top 10 grades for me. Kim was number 1 in 2 different of those categories. You can get that inside of my model at Rotoballer. But it goes back to the question. Like, I kind of even answered it a little bit with Akshay. If there's a reason why I'm looking to get off of somebody and it gives me another reason, sure on it, but I don't think that's a good reason to get off of somebody. We're talking about young kids here that are playing really good golf at this moment.
Yes, they are young and they are playing some scintillating golf. I love his floor. I think he's got as much upside as the rest of the guys, but I think his safety is obviously a little bit better. So Spencer, you've got Aaron Rai over here as your 4th ranked guy. And you know what? I'm going to do what Eric did to you. And I'm going to let Eric go ahead and tell you why you want to play Aaron Rai as your number 1 guy.
Yeah. So once again, my data really looks at like both safety and upside. So he's been someone that over his last 6 starts has made the cut. One missed cut recently. If you go back further, multiple top 10 finishes over his past 9 starts. Just solid form. Top 20 in his last start. Top 20 before that as well. So really good there. Top 10 finish here last year as well. Stat fit wise, I'm looking at ball striking as probably everyone. Top 10 there in the field. Really good strokes gain approach. The one concern is that he doesn't score that much. And that is a little bit of a concern, 56 and birdie or better percentage, but still scores enough on par fives. Like I'm not too concerned about like him struggling this week. I feel pretty confident about him DFS wise and even outright wise. I don't know if he's still 40-1, but I'd be like, he was my first click. He stood out, obviously, if he's number one in my model, but he was one player that when I was doing like the preliminary research, I'm like, man, Aaron Rai is going to be really popping up this week. I wonder where he's going to rank out. And he was number one. So I was kind of happy that happened because he was someone that just like in my head was like, this is going to be the perfect place for him. And that's what the data is saying as well for me on my end. There's just not that much to hate data wise. Like everything is pretty strong across the board. Really his miscut like 7 starts ago is the one concern. Other than that, just really popping up for Aaron Rai.
Yeah, 7 starts is a long time ago, man. So I love it, but it's just for me the lack of point scoring ability. But I mean, this dude's floor has just been ridiculous lately. So really impressive stuff from Aaron Rai. For me, my 4th ranked dude. Oh, sorry, Spence. Go ahead.
I just want to touch on this really quickly because I think Rai is a very intriguing name to have a little bit further of a discussion about here. So, Byron, we talk a lot on this show about lack of upside, lack of birdie making potential, players that are not necessarily reaching their ceiling as frequently as you would like to, whether it's punch an outright ticket, play them in DFS, whatever the answer ends up being there. My pushback has always been that these courses are different, that they're playing every single weekend. Where you don't have upside in one area doesn't mean that you don't have upside in another area. So take par 5 scoring here. He's 33rd in my model in par 5 birdie or better percentage over a 2-year duration. When I ran it specifically for these 4 holes that he's going to be playing, he jumped up to number 13 overall. His par 4 scoring did the same thing. His par 3 scoring did the same thing. All of those factors turned him into this top 10 expected scores. So if there's somebody that I do not have an outright ticket on, and he opened at 40-1, as Eric talked about, that number got hit very quickly. I think he's down in the 33-1 range now. I don't have that ticket. And if somebody was to win this tournament that I don't have, and we do this every single week. Last week it was Tom Kim and Tony Finau. This week it's Aaron Rai. I will have regrets if Aaron Rai ends up winning. There is a lot to like in a model. And I think sometimes that public narrative that comes into play of this guy cannot win a golf tournament runs a little bit too rampant in the minds of DFS players or bettors. And I kind of feel like that's what we got early on when books opened them up at 40-1. And there were enough savvy bettors out there that jumped on it right away and pushed that number down. And that's going to be my regret spot. So I just want that to be able to be clipped after the show when Aaron Rai wins. I love him for DFS. I'm going to play a lot of him there. Didn't get the outright ticket. I do think he's a really intriguing name, though.
The sum of his parts is greater than the whole, right? That's what Aaron Rai does. And he's got more gloves than anyone else on tour. So, hey, let's see what he can get up to. My number 4 guy, no comment. Let's move on. I don't know what the hell he's doing over there. It might be an issue. I don't think he's ever going to get anywhere near where I expect him to. I should have jumped this to you when I had him for number 9, but you've got number 2, and I figured we'd let you kind of chat about Steven Yeager and give him some airtime. Yeah, Eric.
Yeah, so it's a lot of the same things as to why Aaron Rai is popping up, that Yeager is also going to be popping up. The issue with Yeager is like he had some weird form kind of leading up to his victory where he was someone that was kind of trending towards kind of what happened, which was either he was going to win or miss the cut. That's just what we see when someone's playing that good of golf. Turns out he missed the cut and then eventually won as well. So it's kind of weird there. Then after that victory, he missed a cut. And then since then, pretty good finishes. The one missed cut recently was at the Memorial Tournament, which completely different course. That's a harder scoring track where he just, he didn't play well. Safe to say there. This is going to be easier scoring track. So we don't have to kind of worry about that. But that's my biggest concern is that, missing the cut recently, I don't like that aspect of it. Other than that, pretty good. I mean, top 10 finishes at this tournament, raised out really well. Par 5 scoring, ball striking, and then also birdie or better percentage. Could be a little bit better strokes gained approach this season. That's not even really a concern, but would like to see that a little bit better. But third best specialist in the field. Again, that's kind of the course fit that I look at. Obviously, strong course history, strong stat fit. So just across the board, kind of measuring those metrics, just coming in slightly better. And I will say, like, we're kind of living in absolutes when I'm like doing the model ranks like this. Very tight board for like the top 5. I kind of mentioned Norn was 2 before the outright data came in. So very tight board for the top 5 as compared to kind of the last few weeks where it's Scotty, Xander, like more, I don't know, but like those players just keep popping up. So definitely a little bit different week, but I'm kind of okay with that. Again, the recent miscut, slight worry, but it wasn't terrible. So kind of happy to roll with him at 9.4. So that was kind of the player I was teasing earlier when I was saying I don't like paying for Alex Noren when I can just get Jaeger at a little bit cheaper.
Yes, dude. Exactly. And I think I've been doing a lot of best ball NFL stuff, and you let the board fall to you, right? And I think the same comes to fruition when it comes to ownership here. We, with so many guys so close, like you mentioned, whoever's the lowest owned will get my click at the end of the day, for this like 10K kind of range. So in the 9s as well, you can kind of bucket those first 3. You could basically, we have a freaking 5K range, and yet we've only got those 4 guys in there, right? The other 3 should have been in the 10K range too. I don't know, like what's going on. Yeah. I think they pulled a Byron and kind of just forgot to change a setting and left the 5Ks open, but they didn't plan on doing it.
The pricing was weird this week, I will say. Honestly, you might be onto something there. It seems weird that they priced it this way this week. Other weeks it's made sense. This week it was just like, there's a lot of cheap plays that are probably going to make the cut that shouldn't be priced that way.
Right, dude. And like when Scotty's like 13,000, and then that's when you have the 5K range. Now we've got Tom Kim as our best guy, is like 11K. It made 0 sense. But what also makes 0 sense is Kevin Yu at the top of my model. But you know what? I actually don't mind him. We all know that he's a stat model darling. And we've seen this guy pop up in the top 10. So if you're going to just nuke it off the tee, Kevin Yu is your guy. So love, you know what? I'll be playing him in DFS for sure. Top 10 in a bet as well. I think that's the way to go with Kevin Yu because that's his volatility. He's got one of the craziest conversion rates from top 20 to top 10. He's got as many top 10s as he has top 20s. Like that's what you want from a DFS perspective. So I'm fine with him being my 3rd guy because it proves out, in the track record there. So old Kevin University for me. I kind of like this, actually. It's we don't have to keep like dodging the sides of our borders there. So let's actually roll with it this way. We actually look pretty crisp. Some gourmet and cray guys here as we kind of knock out the rest of the board. I'm going to filter on my model over here, make sure that we have the right pricing and go from there. We'll start in, call it the 8K range again. I think that's a good starting point since we've spoken about the majority. You know what? Let's do the gourmet in the 8s. So we've got Michael Thorbjornsen, who's not really shown up in anybody's in models, and he won't because we've got like 0 data on the guy, but I'm a big fan. Hopefully he doesn't become too popular this week. What are your guys' thoughts, Eric, on Michael? He is a nightmare for me because there's Thorbjorn Olesen and Michael Thorbjornsen, and then I've got Eriksson on my top right here. So Eric, talk to me about this guy.
I don't think I really can. I mean, PGA Championship, that's about it. He's just not someone I'm getting into this week. Pretty much he's sandwiched in between other plays that are popping up much better than me. It's just like a 0 click for me, honestly. Just again, my data really likes Keith Mitchell, Davis Thompson, Chris Kirk a little bit. You have like Adam Svensson, Mark Hubbard that likes a little bit better. EVR was some that kind of popped up for you. He ranks out better. So it's like there's no possible way that I'm going to get to him this week, just where he's priced. And that just happens sometimes. That's what it is for me this week.
Vince?
I don't know. If he's low enough owned, I think you could probably convince me to go down that route.
Yeah. I mean, he's got the Matthew Wolff traits, to a degree. So we'll see what Matthew Wolff, I think, won a while ago, and we'll see what happens there. But if he's too popular, if someone big kind of gets behind him and steams him up, then I'm out. It's easy peasy. So
I will say though, like I don't trust any of the ownership numbers that my model pulls in until Tuesday. That's why I don't release it at Rotoballer until we get a little bit more traction. But the one name for me, because there's a lot of popular names in this $8,000 section. Like we've talked about the majority of them so far. I think the one option, if I'm really trying to figure out a way to get contrarian here, I liked Ryan Fox. He was inside of the top 15 on my model, and right now I see him sub 10% ownership, which, is a third of what some of these guys, or about a third of some of these guys that we've talked about.
And Ryan Fox is basically the same as Nikolai. He's got the same potential, hasn't shown up this year. Similar skill sets in a way, I think you're onto something. If we can find these guys that can pop in this range, we'll see what cooks. So, Eric, who is your favorite, your gourmet option in this range? 8,000.
So what exactly do you mean when you say gourmet? Is that a special term?
Sure. So gourmet is like, who are you willing to pay up for because you think, I know you're on a fast. So, this is probably the worst segment for you to actually go through, yeah, because we're speaking about food and stuff. But like, who's like priced high that you think's a little spendy, but you're willing to go there because you think they give you a gourmet kind of characteristic from their skill set?
It's got to be Aaron Rye. It just, for the reasons I mentioned above, 6 straight make cuts for him. Great course history. It's the price is too cheap. He should be. It's not crazy, but he should be higher than Will Zalatoris. Like, it's not that much. It's $400, but that makes a big difference. So it's definitely him. And then Keith Mitchell, upside wise, next. Like, those are the two. I do want to echo. I do really like that Ryan Fox call. He's shown the upside as well somewhat recently. So I would say he could be a good leverage spot as well. But to your point, really Tuesday afternoon ownership really matters. So be interesting to see where he comes in, though.
Yeah. Fox is a perfect gourmet option because he's ranked 71st in my model. But, if we think about what he can get up to, I like it. I think especially at that kind of ownership. Let's dive into the sevens. Obviously, my gourmet is going to be Kevin Yu. I love the little Kevin Yu caviar over there. So that'll be my guy there, along with some Taylor Moore as well. I didn't quite see him in the mix in my model, but I'm a 24th across the board there for me. Spence, who's your gourmet in the sevens?
I guess Højgaard would be the number one. I like Matt Wallace a lot also. Those are the two players in the $7,000 range that I'm trying to gain the most exposure to.
Okay. And who's your cray cray? Whose price is the wrong price? What price is crayfish cray cray? Why are they priced this high when they're actually that bad?
I am very different than you guys on the players that, or at least I should say you, Byron, because I guess you've named two of them so far. I'm going to be out on Eric Van Rooyen.
Okay.
I'm even going to be more out on Taylor Moore.
Okay. That's going to work out wonderfully for one of us this week.
That's a good clip. That's a good clip right there.
This is why you tune into the Rotoballer PGA shows, that you can get no answers. No, I'm just kidding. You pick your side. I think that's going to be a fun part about this is you got to choose your narrative, right, and go with it. So give me your gourmet and cray in the sevens, Mr. Eric.
So probably would have been Matt Wallace. I won't use that. So Adam Svensson, he's been in some good form. Adam Svensson's been a weird play for me over the past month and a half or so, where he was someone that I was like, all right, we're kind of playing him. He's a little bit too cheap, getting some kind of lucky results out of him, in all honesty. RBC Canadian Open 51st place finish. I was like, I'm happy to get a cheap make cut there. Last week, he was just too cheap for a no-cut event. I was kind of happy to get to him top 20. That felt very lucky. And so it's kind of been a weird thing where he's been top 40, top 25, top 40, top 25, that consistency. So we might be getting a top 40 out of him, but he's been someone that's made 11 straight cuts. That's pretty darn good. Has made 2 straight cuts at this tournament. I'm not expecting huge results from him, but I am expecting him to make the cut, which, once we get lower in the pricing tier, especially in this quality of field, that starts to become a premium. And so I do think he gives us a made cut. Again, would have said Matt Wallace, but happy to get to Adam Svensson. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, Eric. I'll let you finish your thought. I just want to add one thing to that after you're done.
No, go. I was going to do the second part of the segment. So
all I was going to say is if you look at this, to me, and I talked about 2 of these players in Van Rooyen and Taylor Moore, but of the golfers 7,500 to 7,900, the most playable option and the one that I'm very interested to get some exposure to would be the Adam Svensson play that you talked about. I thought he was the legitimate option to consider in that range there.
What about, so I'm a little bit surprised that you guys said Mark Hubbard, though. He's been playing pretty well. I know the form recently hasn't been as good, but tougher tracks for him as well. This should be a better course for him. I'm kind of curious your guys' thoughts there.
Millie Goats has had Mark Hubbard on his podcast, so he's obviously all the way up in the colon, the lower colon over there for Hubbard. But what happens with that lower colon is over the weekend, everything good about Mark Hubbard just kind of scoots down the leg there. And Mark Hubbard had the T3 at the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. That was only the third round, right? Like, he does this thing where it's just like he plays such good golf, and then the weekend shows up, and then I don't know what happens, man. It's like been very disappointing. I think outside of that T3, it's only been a top 20. And I know this off the top of my head because I love Mark Hubbard. He always breaks my freaking model, but every time I bet him top 20, he's like, bro, what are we doing? So I'm out on him. It's disappointing all the time. Like, why are we just falling back every single week? It's a fallback.
No.
Spence?
No.
29th in my model, 20th for upside, which is a really weird answer to give. Like, I understand that based off everything. That 20th would be a fair price for him. If the ownership ends up being low enough, and that's where we're having complicated discussions here because we don't know where the ownership's going to land. He might be the second name of that mix that I would be willing to consider. But for the most part, every other option, 7,500 and up, I'm probably out on.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Is that your cray play there, Eric Hubbard?
No, so like EVR, like I'm kind of right there. He's a good stat fit. Like he's a play once again where I wouldn't talk anyone out of him, but he's someone that I would rather get to Ben Griffin, Hubbard, and Svensson. So kind of tougher there for me with him. It'd probably be him. Like he's probably a little bit too high priced in comparison to everyone, but not a play I would talk like anyone out of like terribly.
Yeah. You guys can't hear it, but the South African flag over my left shoulder is busy screaming like curse words in Afrikaans at you guys because this is no place for Eric van Rooyen slander, folks. I'm just telling you that right now. I'm just kidding. You are more than welcome to air your opinions, and that's exactly why we got you on the show. Both of you not liking him is not good omen for me, but I'm going to stick by my guy. I love his upside. I love what, I'm not going to go and invest a top 40 bet on the guy. If he's low end, I'll be in. If he's not, we're out. So scooting on into the sixes. Yeah, we got a fun little picture of you, which I'll start off with. I really fancy Alejandro Tosti. I know that this is the form is wishy-washy. It's very interesting, but if we expecting this to play like a Corn Ferry Tour event, right, with the scoring getting to -25, nuke it, make as many putts as birdies as you can. Alejandro Tosti, that's how I got on the PGA Tour through the PGA KFT. So he'll be my gourmet play. I know the price point is kind of interesting at $6,600 when we got a 5K range, but he'll be my one guy. And then Jake Knapp, obviously, I love his upside here. Go ahead and tell me who your gourmets are, Mr. Eric, and then Spence, and then I'll go with we can go cray after that.
So I got to go a little bit biased here. So this player went to my alma mater for 1 year, and then he transferred, and that's Winona State. If anyone, the fun fact there, he went to Boise. Winona State. It's a Minnesota school. Yeah. So and then he transferred to Boise State, I believe, is where he transferred. Does anyone know? Troy Merritt. So obviously Troy Merritt has great course history here. Probably my most tilting outright bet ever was when Cameron Davis chipped in for eagle on 17. Like that still stings me to this day. And like every time this tournament pops up, it still stings me because it was Troy Merritt 100 to 1 there. Only reason I bet him, not the only reason, but part of the reason why I bet him was because of, that stupid ties there. But since then has played well at this track, 14th and 17th place finish, had an 8th place finish the year prior to his 2nd place runner-up finish there. And he is someone that is never going to really pop up too much for you, but he is also someone that is really kind of very hit or miss. When he is on, he's probably going to give you a top 10 finish. When he's on his game, he's more hit or miss, though. That's the thing with him. He's typically someone that's hit or miss, but kind of been on more recently. I mean, missed cut at the RBC Canadian Open. That was +1. Not terrible. Prior to that, 4 straight made cuts, including a top 10 finish. So given the fact that he has that tremendous course history, and then given the price tag, I'm really intrigued in that. Like I kind of, in a weird way, I kind of view him and Kevin Yu as similar plays. Like you'd be playing them for different reasons. Like Kevin Yu's an elite stat fit, but kind of with the same logic where you're chasing that upside. Troy Merritt's 6'3", and like, sure, more times than not, he's not going to give you a top 10 finish, but I think that possibility is there, whereas other players in this range, it's just not there.
Fun little fact about Troy Merritt. I broke the news that he had the yips. I asked him about something on Twitter, and he quote tweeted it and said, "I've got the yips." And I was like, should I go into like journalism now? But no, it was just by pure coincidence. I was just like curious. And he was the one guy that replied and was like so honest about it. And like, he has such a soft spot in my heart because, these guys, they just show you like what they go through. I mean, I can't imagine having to deal with that kind of stuff as a professional golfer. That's so embarrassing, but there's nothing you can do about it. I've had the shanks, and I was drinking vodka like in college before rounds, just trying to like in my Gatorade bottle, trying to just like calm the nerves somehow and just get it together. But it's not fun when your game goes across the plains, man. So Spence, Gourmet in the sixes.
I hear alma mater, and it always propels me to talk about UNLV golfers. If you want to throw all caution to the wind this week, and this is not the player that I'm going to necessarily give as the gourmet pick because I think there's safer routes to go, but you want to talk about a golfer that's going to probably be sub 1%. He has not played in a while because of injuries. I don't know where he's at right now, but if Taylor Montgomery had come to this tournament with any semblance of form and an injury concern that was not there, I legitimately think he'd be priced as a top 30 player in this tournament. I know the iron play is very questionable. The short iron play, though, is where he's the best. If you take total driving, you add it to short iron proximity, and you add it to comp putting, which would be just similar courses with similar green complexes. And I mean, you could throw Taylor Montgomery anywhere with the putter. He's going to look great. He was number 2 in my model in that area. He graded inside of the top 20 for me. Some of the safety concerns, which would be what comes into play from the opposite end of the discussion. But for a GPP answer, if you're just trying to throw caution to the wind and find that sub 1% play, I really like Taylor Montgomery. The name for me, though, that I feel safer punching or pushing when push comes to shove with it would be Thorbjorn Olesen at 6,900. My model liked a lot about him. He's produced 5 made cuts during his past 6 events. He landed 16th in this field for that same category that I just talked about a second ago for Taylor Montgomery. So I don't think either one of them is going to be extremely popular. I kind of feel like Olesen has reached the point now to where when he was playing the PGA Tour events early in the year, there was all this hype of what he was going to be, and we haven't necessarily gotten any of that, but we've seen him turn it around a bit with those 5 made cuts that I've talked about in 6 events. So there may be a safer floor here than meets the eye, and I don't think he's going to be more than 7 or 8% owned, and that's probably pushing it on the high end.
Yeah, and he also has so much talent over at the DP. He's kind of started showing up now. So Spence, who has a fly in the ointment, and give us one reason why you don't like them.
So Byron, we've talked about this quite frequently on the show of my every single week having this with Data Golf where we go back and forth on the matchups. And I gave Carson Young over Ben Silverman in a matchup. Bet Online pulled it off the board in 2.5 minutes, opened it back up at minus 138. Data Golf puts up their numbers. It's now moved back down into the minus 132 range. We'll see if it can continue falling into the territory or closer to the territory of what we got it at opening there. But as much as I like Silverman to begin this year at some of these events, he was outside the top 100 in my model. The other name that I'll at least throw out there, because I think he will garner more ownership than he probably should, would be Cameron Champ, just because of the distance play here. I think everybody's going to want to get to Cameron Champ. If he's not popular, we can have a different discussion. I'm still not going to get there from where he grades in my model, but I kind of feel like that the general public might go to Cameron Champ in his distance.
They do that, man. They did the same thing at Mexico, and he just did his thing, and it was like, this is infuriating. They don't deserve this. So, Eric, who's cray for you in the Sixers?
Can I cheat and do a 7K play or no?
Sure, of course.
Eric Polzin. I feel like his name has been around in events a lot recently, so people might be like interested to click him, but he's not going to pop up anyways. If I didn't want to cheat, can I flip the narrative on Taylor Montgomery? Because to your point, like, I do think if he had played a couple events, he would be much higher priced than he is. And I think he's actually going to be higher owned for that reason. Like, he's the one player that I thought had name value in this range that, like, I would blindly want to click on, just like, oh, Taylor Montgomery's there. Yeah. He's someone that could pop and be there. So I could see a lot more people just naturally doing that. And maybe that's just two of us, kind of me overthinking, or, just both of us overthinking on one side or the other. I think it's a sharp play. At the same time, if he is coming in high owned, like I probably think he's going to be a little bit higher owned due to name value. And so he would have been the one play name value wise. I would have said, like, I didn't want to say a 6K play. So would have been probably Montgomery. But other than that,
Davis Riley just shows up, wins a tournament, and peels out and starts sucking again. Like, I'm out on him. He's my cray-cray. You know, like $6,800. I don't care. He's like 119th in the model. Like, what are we doing over here? Like, also, how did he just win a tournament? I just can't believe he fended off Scotty Scheffler. Like, no one's saying that. Like, the only person to do it was Jaeger. Like, Davis Riley as well. You know, like, but he's a nobody. Like, it just did that out of nowhere. So he's my cray-cray option in the sixes.
Eric, can I ask you a question very quickly before we move on? At what ownership percentage, and this is somebody that you're lower on to begin with, I guess, but at what ownership percentage would you deem Taylor Montgomery to be too high?
So I'd have to see, like, obviously the lower you go down, the less likely a player is to make the cut. So I would honestly just have to see data wise. I would assume it'd be 5%, honestly, 5 to 4%. So like how much overweight would you want to be at that point? Like 10 probably, right? Double the field. So like that's the tough part. So it really just depends on his ownership. Like I do think if he is lower than 5%, that is a very sharp play. If he is a little bit higher than that, then probably someone I'm staying away from. Obviously the closer to 10%, the less likely I would be to want to chase him. Is that kind of where you're at too?
I think for me, I would probably like the ownership that I would want to get on him would probably be 12 to 14%, maybe 12 to 15%. So if all of a sudden I'm not getting double the leverage there, if he comes in at, 7.5%, which maybe you are correct with that, where, look, I mean, there's a lot of shows out there. This is one of them. I don't know if other people have talked about Taylor Montgomery, but it just takes one or two discussions to happen. And then all of a sudden he jumps from, I feel like JT Poston did this last week. We came on this show, Byron, and I talked about JT Poston when he was going to be sub 5% owned. And then all of a sudden Wednesday rolled around and he's one of the most popular players in his range. And everything that we talked about this show kind of went in the opposite direction. And there's always that nature that it could occur. But if he's 5%, I will play him for double or triple. If we start pushing higher than that, I do believe that there's a discussion to be had.
Yeah. And like I said, that's rooted in, I think other people are going to be mentioning him because he does have that name value and he does have that upside when his game's on. Like we have seen that. And it's just, he's kind of like a play. You can find a reason to play like, for the reasons you mentioned. Like it's not a bad call, but again, if we're trying to find someone in that range, that'd have been the one I would have chose.
Yeah, and I didn't even know he was injured, so I would have just clicked his name, just looking at all this stuff, and like, all right, let's go. So,
what was his injury? Do you know, Spencer? Sorry,
I have tried to look this up, and they have been very tight-lipped from what I am able to see on this. Like he pulled out of the Valero, and then he pulled out the next week, and I know he shot an 80 during that round, and I mean he's going to leave when things are not going right there.
Brain
and
injury.
I don't know the answer to that though. I haven't been able to find that.
Because that obviously matters too.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen what it does to Daniel Berger and the short game, right? So we'll see what he gets up to. But my gourmet in the fives, boys, Kevin Doherty. This dude is just off the tee. He's elite, dude. Like he's got so much distance off the tee and he's so solid. Give me that kind of skill set at a $5,800 price tag. I'm in. $5,500 price tag. I'm in. Someone that I don't see doing anything around this kind of golf course is Zach Johnson at $5,500. If I had to pick some, I mean, there's obviously cray options all the way through this 5K range, but if there's one person I'm not playing, it's Zach at a venue like this. So, Eric, thoughts?
Can you give me a second? Because I feel like there's two that are actually decent here. I want to find
Sounds
them real
good.
quick.
Go ahead, Spence.
I'd probably double down with the Carson Young answer. I don't necessarily feel super confident about him, but he does have a higher made cut rate in my sheet than a lot of these other names. I'm a little bit higher than you are, Byron, on Zach Johnson. It doesn't mean that I'm necessarily going to get them. But
has Zach Johnson changed his nationality to South African? Is that what's happened, Jeff Spencer?
I don't know. You'll have to tell me on that one. But it's so difficult to throw a name out that is cray-cray just because
All right, let's ditch the cray crays and just go with the gourmets because we're not going to tell people we're not to play in the fives. Let's just go with we will.
I'll say Carson Young then, I guess.
Okay. Eric, you found your guy yet?
Well, one of them is Patton Kazire, and it's just I don't exactly want to give that, but at the same time, I think he's going to be extremely low owned. He is someone that did pop in some other events where he had like one bad round and then a good round where he missed the cut. Like he's fine. Another one that was really popping though for me was actually Patton Kazire. Patton Kazire coming in off of a miscut at the RBC Canadian Open. Otherwise, he had been pretty good. A top 10 finish, top 25. So he'd probably be the play I'd want to get to the most, especially probably not going to be high owned. Someone that can have upside. Decently good stat fit as well for this price tag. Like you can find reasons to play him. And so those are kind of the two I would give that I was thinking of. The other one was Kevin Tway, but he's 6K. So
that's okay. That's okay. We can kind of
nice
let ourselves kind of just round up a touch here. It's going to be a weird week with these guys that we're going to have to. I mean, we got this free 5K range essentially this week. So I think you got to play a few of them because especially this week, if people are going to be sliding them in, this is the week where the 5K range is the most likely to show up out of there, not the majors, because those guys just don't have the skill sets required to get up there. So without Scotty, what the hell are we doing with this 5K range? It blows my mind, but we're going to try and exploit it. And I built a lineup that had 3 9K guys. Those 3 guys at the top of the 9K range. I would be shocked. I mean, thinking about it now, that's going to be likely how people go ahead. You could even, I don't know. So some wild stuff. Darbo showing up very late. Yes.
You could theoretically just do, I don't know if you guys are people that do hand builds or if you do mix and match, but if you're doing hand builds, you could just do 3 9K plays, toss in 3 different variations of a 5.6 or so K play, hope that one of them makes the cut and gives you a top 20 finish. I don't hate that idea.
Right. I mean, that's just the thing is this is going to be, they've given us this chaotic week and then the pricing was just even more chaotic than the actual event that we're going to be playing this tournament with. So fascinating situation. Spence, give us your final thoughts on the week before we start getting out of here.
I think there are a lot of players, and it's kind of what we've been talking about. Just go from 6,300 and less. There are a lot of playable commodities down in that mix. I like the Patton Kazire call from Eric. Yeah. He was somebody that popped in my model also. There's also a lot of UNLV golfers. You can find all of them down there to just double back down on that one. But there are a handful of guys. Troy Merritt, Jacob Bridgman, Alex Smalley, Vincent Whaley, David Skins, Kevin Tway graded fine in my model. Talked about Carson Young. These are all, I guess, Garrett Kago, if you want to name a UNLV golfer, but these are all top 60 players in my model that you can get really cheap that have what I'm typically looking for in GPP contests. Because the worst type of low price plays to me are the high owned safety rating poppers, the ones that are going to be inside of the top 30 of your safety rating and they're 10% owned. You want to go the opposite route with it where they're lower owned and they have that high upside in the build if you're going to enter them in large field contests. And we'll see where the ownership ends up landing with a lot of those names, but I would have a feeling that there will be a handful of them, and we'll figure that out over the next 48 hours. But I do think there will be a handful of them that are very interesting playable commodities that probably work inside of the top 20 of this tournament.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a fun week. Eric, you do some wonderful stuff over on your variation of channels. I believe you took your 9 to 5 sports and split it into the golf one too. So go ahead and just tell all of our friends here in the chats, and we're going to listen what's going on in your life and plug away, baby. I really like your stuff a lot, man.
I appreciate that. So yeah, this past season for the 2024 season, I decided to split my YouTube channel up into 2 YouTube channels. There's the main one, which is 9 to 5 sports, which is going to cover football once it comes back around, but it's mostly just betting now. Obviously that's really huge. And so I was so sick of, having the golf niche market and then having the huge betting market on different sports. It was just defeating, you see the analytics on it. So I made another YouTube channel, which is doing pretty well, 9 to 5 golf, and a lot of support from people out there as well. It's kind of a risky thing, I would say, to do, but it's worked out. So yeah, check that out if you guys want to. Follow me on Twitter as well. the nice thing about doing the 9 to 5 golf YouTube channels, I feel like I've been able to intermingle with a lot of people a little bit more so on Twitter as well, or X, I guess now. So it's been nice. It's a good transition. It's kind of been good for, is it mental health month for men, or was that last month or whatever?
I think it's been a long month. So yeah, it's the end of June. I think we're fine.
So there you go. That's part of it as well. So it's been nice. But yeah. Yeah, if you guys want to check out some more of my stuff, 9to5sports.com, you guys can see me on X and YouTube as well. So check that out.
And I'm going to just keep going on Eric's stuff here, because my favorite thing about Spencer, my favorite thing about Eric is you build your own stuff, right? Like you develop your own models. And when the golf best ball came out, you were one of the first few people to really have a tool for that, and a very unique and user-friendly tool, man. So, you've got wonderful, wonderful tools out there. And I admire how you put together everything, and it's just an incredible package out there. So you guys definitely should go check that out. Also go check out Rotoballer, because obviously this is Rotoballer PGA show, and use code TOFF or Maniac and you can wrap yourself 10% there. So we really appreciate all of you for jumping in here. Also, don't forget to hit the like button on the way out, subscribe to the Rotoballer PGA show, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Let me answer Edward's question very quickly.